Hey everybody, it's Party Elite, and today we're taking a look at a brand new real-time tactics game set in World War II, where you lead a group of resistance fighters behind enemy lines on the Eastern Front. Partisans 1941 will remind you in many ways of the Commandos series, or perhaps the more recent Desperados 3, of course with a different setting. We're not in the Wild West here. You're focused on sneaking around and engaging only when necessary as you try to survive as the underdog against the might of the military occupation. Before I dive in, I want to mention that I did receive a review copy of the game for free, but naturally that doesn't impact my opinion, and I think that'll be plenty clear as we go along. On which note, let's begin. Set in 1941, Partisans has you leading a small, ragged group of freedom fighters against Nazi occupation on the Eastern Front. Starting as a POW making their escape, you establish a small camp with a few associates and proceed to take on new recruits as you progress through the missions, all while maintaining your jerry-rigged headquarters as well. Each of the characters you have access to can be kitted out using gear you've acquired during missions and tasks, and they can be leveled up, with there being some variance between the different members of your team, setting them apart. Some will be more naturally inclined to using one type of weapon over another, but the real difference comes in their special abilities. The kid that can disguise himself and gain access to most places in plain sight, distracting guards with conversation, is a very different tool from the man who can spray SMG fire to suppress or kill multiple enemies in a cone. Anybody can be equipped with a knife for stealthy killing, though without the melee skill leveled up, higher tier enemies will put up a fight that creates a lot of noise, and the target might actually even come out on top. But with a leveled up melee skill, you'll avoid some of those struggles. But either way, melee is almost always a struggle and therefore time consuming. So, properly leveled up, some folks can use chloroform for a quicker temporary solution, followed by a quick stab on the dropped and moved body to bring a more permanent conclusion to a potential situation. And then there are the more nuanced differences. Anybody can put down a bottle of booze to draw out guards to have a drink, but only with the right skill can that same bottle of booze also knock guards out with a sip. Anybody can fire an SMG, but only somebody with long burst can fire at multiple targets at a time. It takes a few missions before all of these variations start getting introduced, and as that's happening, you'll be, as I mentioned before, managing your headquarters as well. Starting from a small camp, you can build up a logging area, a fishing area, a medical tent to prepare medical supplies, a weapons workshop to upgrade weapons, spots to cook and prepare food, and many more things. Each day, you can choose to send individuals off to any one of the many available tasks. Some of them involve building new areas of the camp to unlock new mechanics or tasks, while others involve gathering food, helping keep morale from failing, while others still involve gathering supplies. These are needed to do pretty much anything at camp. There are also small side missions that you don't actually play, but just gain various benefits from should your partisans succeed. You get XP, more of the two resources, weapons, ammo, etc., etc. It's a fun bit of base and task management, and your looting while out on missions directly impacts your resources here, making for a nice bit of integration between the two layers of gameplay. Since missions are spread out over a set number of days, you'll only ever have so much time at camp at a time before needing to set some, if not all of your partisans aside for the story mission. When it comes time to go on one of these story missions, you are sometimes locked into who you can take or who you have to take based on the story, but at other times, one or all of the slots are left open for you to decide, which also means you can choose to leave people behind, allowing them to take on other HQ tasks instead while you're out performing the mission. This is where the differences in skills and weapons proficiency comes into play, and where you'll want to keep a track of how much ammo of each type you have, how much equipment of certain types you have, if you want to go in with someone who's good with mines versus someone who's particularly capable with bottles of booze or what have you. Again, this is where the game really kind of stands out, where the inventory management, the weapon management, and the skill management results in you picking and choosing who goes out on any given mission, trying to make sure you don't get caught with your pants down in the middle of a shootout. Missions themselves range from about 20 to 30 minutes of length on average, depending on how patient and careful you are, and the quick save, quick load approach is a necessary tool when you're experimenting with different approaches. Following guard patrols, checking out their lines of sight, familiarizing yourself with opportunities to strike, and then doing so makes Partisans 1941 feel like a stealth puzzle game, especially on levels where stealth is not just an option, but an obligation. A single gunshot will be a mission fail. That aside, missions will sometimes give alternative angles of approach, allowing you to tackle things a little differently if you'd like. There was, in fact, a mission that I approached in reverse order, securing an objective for which I knew I needed a vial of poison, and then going to get the vial of poison after, rather than the other way around, arguably the right way around. There wasn't any particular benefit to my approach other than I felt more comfortable with it, and I took advantage of that comfort. This level of openness is very nice to see, and it happens at various scales. Sometimes you have to infiltrate a compound and you can choose between one of 2 or 3 entrances, and at other times you can opt to fish out a key that'll help you unlock alternative entrances, or you can choose to ignore that entirely and go in guns blazing. Timing my attacks to when guards turn to look away, ensuring that killing happened out of earshot, and even looking at enemy ranks to figure out how long a melee kill would take in case they struggle. It was all fun to try to solve these puzzles, and trying to find ways around them was just as interesting as well. I didn't always want to engage everybody, and the game, from time to time, allows you to avoid engagements, but it does reward you greatly for every kill you get, which means chances are, rather than be full stealth and pacifist, you're going to be killing some people at every given opportunity. Now, some of the earlier missions have some awkward moments where things that look like alternative approaches turn out to be dead ends instead, but as the game goes on, it opens up, and as more characters become unlocked, the options become more varied, and the planning and execution feels more involved. Using the slow motion mode to synchronize moves becomes more and more important as things get more and more complex, and it can lead to some very exhilarating action moments where the guns go off and you're timing your movements to enemies reloading and trying to flush them out of cover with flanking maneuvers and grenades. It's a very nice foil for the more tense and suspense-driven stealth moments where you're planting mines and tripwires, or tossing distracting rocks and placing bottles, or using tobacco to distract dogs that would sniff you out from your hiding spots otherwise. It really very nicely comes together. And then there's the health and injury management. Being shot up will hurt and ultimately drop your characters when they take too much damage. They can be resuscitated and healed with the right items from your inventory if you have them. Where things get a bit more interesting is with injuries. Sometimes being shot won't kill you, but will leave you with an injury instead. I mean, it can do both, but the injuries can happen with or without death, and these injuries can be temporarily healed in the middle of a mission using items if you have them, or you might be stuck with them and their effects at least until you return to base and spend some time to heal up. And these injuries can do all sorts of things, including reduce sprinting speed, worsen hit chances, or make entire classes of weapons inoperable. Whether you temporarily heal the injury or not, the permanent healing can only happen at the camp using the medical tent. It costs resources, and it takes a whole day, preventing that partisan from contributing in any other way. I honestly rarely saw injuries that stuck, especially with quick saves and quick loads saving me from particularly rough situations more often than not, but in harder difficulties, or with the self-imposed challenge of not using the quick load feature, injuries will be a serious consideration, and they are a very fun addition to this system of game. Allowing too many to accumulate will render your group pretty much incapable of efficient operation, and having too many people in the healing tent back at HQ means they won't be gathering food or resources that you need to do pretty much anything at HQ, with food being particularly important for keeping morale up. Now, morale is a consistent consideration, and I always love when it's introduced or included as a concept in a game. In the case of Partisans 1941, the improper management of food or looting locals' supplies will reduce your people's morale, and low morale can cause issues with performance, while higher morale will help instead. I particularly enjoy this whole concept of looting local supplies. There's something to be said about this type of kind of guerrilla resistance, where at times you do have to do things that might present a moral dilemma, and without beating you over the head about it, Partisans 1941 tries to make it a part of the conversation. At times you will feel desperate, you'll feel as though you need the food more than these, villagers might. You might be tempted to, well, steal from the very people you're supposed to be protecting. Now again, it doesn't beat you over the head with it, it doesn't make you think about it for, hours before you fall asleep at night, but it definitely was different from what I would expect. Just seeing the game warn me about stealing, and knowing that it would actually make my partisans feel bad and perform worse, it was nice. Now, all of these mechanics come together to create a compelling experience overall, but unfortunately, there are some shortcomings to discuss as well. For one, the writing ranges from alright at best to questionable. Some of the mid-mission chatter is awkward, and even the fully scripted sections often had me questioning if I'd been teleported to some alternative reality where people talked like this.
Wait, let's have a little girl talk.
About us?
Of course, who else?
Writing isn't a big deal to some, but for a linear, story-driven game, it certainly stands out to me as a sticking point. But beyond that, the game overall is lacking a fair bit of polish. There are some minor things, like audio effects and visuals not syncing up. Then there are bigger things, like guards walking away from an altercation, or animations that flip, or UI not making it clear which of your partisans needs healing while at the HQ. And then there are the major ones, like not appearing to be in a hiding spot even though you are, or enemies walking in place on their way to cover in the middle of a gunfight, or vision cones not being actually representative of what the enemy is able to see, or even knocked out enemies who appear to still be standing when they're actually down and out. And I don't even know how to classify the one time a trip mine went off a little to the side, leaving one in a patrol of 3 alive, but he didn't notice the massive explosion that happened right next to him, and he walked away like nothing happened. It's not only immersion breaking, but it adds a layer of unpredictability in a set of systems and mechanics where some systems and some rules have to work as expected for a game like this, because otherwise, sometimes you're just staring at the screen, not knowing what happened and how to recreate it, or how to avoid it if it was a bad thing. Sometimes a cutscene will prevent you from noticing that you've been spotted, since the cutscene is in-engine and real-time, and that's led to a couple of unfortunate surprises. And the occasional pathfinding struggles or moonwalking partisans are rare, but again, if they result in you getting caught, they are infuriating problems to have.
Fire!
Environmental kills feel entirely lacking and uninteresting, and the janky animations and physics, and sometimes downright, again, inconsistent nature of them, makes them feel very much not worth the trouble. Some of this lacking polish comes together to a great detriment. There is, as I said before, little that is more frustrating than being spotted where you supposedly shouldn't be in a game like this. When core and basic systems like vision cones and stealth don't work smoothly in a stealth game, there's a big problem. Now, granted, I'm suffering from some problems more than others might because I always try to be cheeky or clever when a simple solution would do the trick, forcing myself to, be stealthy where going in guns blazing would be easier or would be the obvious choice, for example. But even with that said, I couldn't help but feel annoyed at the game at least once per sitting, frustrated at one glaring problem or another. It all boils down to patience, unfortunately. Partisans is a fun game when it's working right. Planning attacks, seeing them go wrong and then quickly adjusting to course correct, or otherwise nailing particularly sweet executions with your band of brothers and sisters is a satisfying and often exhilarating feeling. The tension in stealth and the dangers of open combat are very nicely balanced, and positioning and use of skills plays a key role, while appropriate leveling and equipment management adds a few interesting extra elements. Longer and more dangerous missions see the involvement of systems like injuries ramp up, and the base management is a nice addition, if not a little simple. But when Partisans isn't working right, man, it can be very irritating. I'm not expecting a game to be perfect on launch. Everything has issues. These are big projects. There will be problems, but some of the problems that Partisans has are directly opposed to the type of game it's supposed to be. Like I said before, you can't make a stealth tactics game where enemy vision cones are not entirely accurate. These games can be frustrating at the best of times, so to have bugs add to that is a big minus for me. It doesn't matter how good the music is, and it is very nice, and it doesn't matter how interesting some of the environments are, or how nice the art itself is. I like how the game looks and how it sounds for the most part, outside of the voice acting like I mentioned earlier, but none of it matters at the end of the day if the key systems are rough around the edges, and that's what we have here. I'd love to be able to recommend this one wholeheartedly, but instead, honestly, consider your level of tolerance for this kind of jankiness. Maybe keep an eye out for developer updates on fixes, because many of these issues are easily patched, and once that's happened, this will definitely scratch that World War II tactical stealth itch. I hope this review helps you understand how Partisans 1941 shines, and where it needs some extra polish. If you have any questions or thoughts of your own, feel free to let me know down below or in our Discord, linked in the description down below as well. Now, for more strategy gaming reviews, previews, and Let's Plays, don't hesitate to subscribe to the channel, and as always, a massive thanks goes out to all of my channel members and patrons for supporting the channel on a monthly basis. Y'all keep us alive and running smoothly, and of course, a big old thanks goes out to each and every one of you for watching. Until next time, cheers.